Hi there. Recently, I had the opportunity to interview Jack Kertzman, the studio manager of Hyde Street Studios, a ridiculously historic studio in San Francisco. Please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps me out. Growing this channel is going to make it a lot easier to do videos like this in the future. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jack Kertzman and a tour of Hyde Street Studios.
My name is Jack Kertzman. I'm the manager of Hyde Street Studios, recording studio here in San Francisco. So we do everything in the music production process, from recording, editing, mixing, dabble in a little bit of mastering. Yeah, it's a one-stop shop to finish a record. And everything from, all across all genres. So you got rock records happening here, funk records, hip hop, metal. It's a real mixed bag. I don't know that there is a story behind the name of Hyde Street Studios. I think it's just
located on Hyde Street.
Yeah. The history of the studio from 1969 to 1980, this was called Wally Hyder Recording, owned by a guy named Wally Hyder. And when they vacated in 1980, the current owner, Michael Ward, took over. So he's had it now for 40 plus years. Long tenure, but he changed the name to Hyde Street Studios, or called his business Hyde Street Studios, when he took over the building. So
That's awesome. So it's been a studio for a long time. Has it always been a studio, or is there any other history from the building?
There is a little deeper history to the building previous to it being a studio. The building used to be a film depository and film screening location. So from what I understand, they would house films here before they would go out to theaters. And then they had a screening room in the building here. There's some odd features to the architecture of the building, where there are like portals built from the main floor all the way to the roof, so that if the film started on fire, the fire would go up rather than destroy the whole building. So our current audio tape vault has that is in the middle of it, is that sort of silo structure kind of going to the roof. So this is Hyde Street Studios. This is our front desk area. This is Matt.
Hey guys.
Our interns here. So the studio was built in 1969. Of course, all the records you see on the walls were recorded here. It's been under the same owner since 1980. And a lot of variety in what we've done here. This space is basically just for receiving guests here. This has been pretty much untouched since 1969. There's photos of this front desk from back then that look exactly the same.
You still sitting there? And those pictures too?
Yes, sir.
He's a very old man. So as we walk through the halls here, you'll see some more gold records and stuff. When I first started here, Michael Ward, the owner of the studio, he had all of these gold records in his office, which was like an 8x8 room. And there were none in the hallways. And you would go into that room and it was the most intimidating thing ever. It was just wall to wall, like an inch between each frame, just wall to wall gold records. It's crazy.
You're like, that's my boss.
Yeah, so I convinced him to put them on the walls out here. I'm like, what are you doing with these?
Can you tell me a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So my background is I grew up in Minnesota, Wisconsin area. I went to school at University of Wisconsin for audio recording and music industry. And I got here 13 years ago. Started as an intern, worked my way up to engineering for about 4 or 5 years, and then the management job became available here, and I jumped at that because it's one of the few ways you can be a 9-to-5 worker in a recording studio. So I grew up just loving music. I didn't have a musical family like with a lot of musicians, but my cousin taught me to play bass guitar when I was like 12 because my friends all played the other instruments and they needed a bass player. So that's what I did there, and I just fell in love right away, and have grown over the years to have like an appreciation for a lot of different genres of music. I went through phases where I'm deep into this or that and the other thing. So
Nice. Do you still play bass today?
I do, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I play in a couple bands. So.
What style of music do you typically like to lean into?
I play in a punk band right now, and I play in an Americana folk kind of band. Our main business is 2 rooms at Studio A and our Rancho Rivera studio in the Sunset District. So this is our main studio here at our downtown location. One of the big draws to the studio here is the Neve 8038 console. So this is a console built in 1974, and they just really made them, it's like a classic car. It's like the Cadillac of recording consoles. That's what Dave Grohl says about his version. But just all of the components they used are really high quality. The EQs are really sought after. So there's about a half dozen companies that will make recreations of these channel strips, and people will buy, a pair of them and put them in their back wall racks. But for us to have the real thing and to have a whole console of it is pretty unique and pretty awesome. Draws a lot of engineers and producers from all over just to work on this. So we have, a collection of outboard gear, and because the studio's been around since 1980, it's the kind of stuff that, it's been collected over the years that if you were to build a studio today and try to buy all of this stuff, it would just be prohibitively expensive. It would just be stupid. But in 1980, it wasn't crazy to just pick up an LA2A. That's a compressor that would probably cost you 10 grand now. But so we've got all of that. We've got the latest Pro Tools, latest Avid converters. It's really a good blend of the latest modern technology with the history of recording. So you can make a record in here that sounds super modern, or you can make a record that sounds exactly like it was recorded in like 1975. All right, so this is our recording room for Studio A. We've got 2 booths in here. Those were put in the 80s. So originally this was just one big room, but as recording styles changed, there was the need for more isolation. So the idea behind that, of course, is you can have, say, drums out here and, a guitar amp in one of these rooms or a singer in one of these rooms, and you don't get drum sounds in your vocal mic and vice versa. So a lot of flexibility here. We've got the 2 booths. We've also got a little airlock between the control room and the live room here that we can get a little isolation from as well. And we try to provide, in terms of instruments, all of the big things that you wouldn't want to bring to a recording session. Some of the first things that were done in here were Grateful Dead's American Beauty, Crosby, Stills, Nash Young, Jefferson Airplane, Santana, CCR. So the history here is really intense, and it's something that I gotta, keep reminding myself of because it's so insane. So yeah, the structure of Hyde Street Studios is a little unique. We have our core business, Hyde Street Studios proper, which is Studio A here, and our Rancho Rivera studio. So it's a sort of a 2-room operation that I have clients book, by the day, by the half day, that sort of thing. And then in addition to that, there's, about 10 other rooms in the building here. Some of them big, original to the building, very acoustically designed studios like this, and others that are like smaller converted office spaces that we've got, treated, wired up, and we lease out to other businesses. So there's a number of these other businesses in the building, some doing like sound for film, sound for video games, other people doing music just like we are. Some client facing, some like just doing their own productions. So it's really unique. It's a fun place to like run into people in the halls that are working on something that's not something that I booked and like set all up and everything. It's like,
it's fun. It's like a real community.
It is. It's a real community, and it's like, we've got our core business, but there's all this other stuff going on in the building. Some albums that really spoke to me as an individual, especially coming here, that have been done here is Grateful Dead's American Beauty was done here. The Cake records were done here, like most of their big ones. Green Day's Insomniac. Those were records that I like really loved and kind of made the decision easy for me to come here versus another studio.
What about as a producer engineer? Are there specific albums that have had an influence on how you like to work?
Yeah, I think me as an engineer producer, I don't do a ton of it anymore because I'm managing the studio, but I do work on some projects. Get in here, like to flex that muscle, make sure I'm knock the rust off. I guess.
Lose it.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, but in terms of my influence there, it really depends on the genre. Like I said, I do like all sorts of genres. So I'll get into metal records or punk records or acoustic music and hip hop and funk and soul and reggae and like all sorts of stuff. So it kind of depends on the genre because I like to work on a variety. I don't like to work myself into a niche, but I guess just generally speaking, some of the best produced records I've heard are, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but Steely Dan is sort of like a gold standard for just like great, pop rock, like clean, amazing sounds. So these doors we just walked out here, before the booths were put into the room, like I said, there was one big room in there. And this is one of my favorite photos of Studio A. This is from 1970. It's Jerry Garcia, David Crosby, Neil Young, and Phil Lesh. And they're standing in front of the doors we just walked through there in Studio A. That was during the recording of David Crosby's solo record. So we've got some common areas here. We've got a vintage soda machine that I refuse to give up, even though I have to fix it constantly. Kitchen and bathrooms back here. And this is sort of a new addition. A couple of years ago we put this up. It's a collection of 54 of the more notable records that were recorded here over the years since 1969 to today. This is the most well-lit room in our studio.
Yeah, I gotta adjust my aperture.
Yeah, exactly. It's the only room with really bright fluorescent lights for our techs. But we've got a couple techs that work here and maintain all of our gear for us. So having a room like this is really necessary, and it's something that was has been a mainstay here over the years. And you can see that we've got every level of resistor and capacitor and all sorts of different parts here to be able to fix all the crazy gear we have here.
Awesome. So everything's is serviced in-house then?
Pretty much everything, yeah. I mean, there's some small things that we'll send out for servicing. Like we get our microphone capsules serviced by Siegfried Thiersch in Germany because he's like the guy for that. But as much as we can do here in-house, we do. When I was in high school, I bought like a little 4-track cassette recorder, and I was like recording my friends making music, and I had a lot of fun with that. And that it just kind of built from there to, my interest in, the creative process of music was sort of stemmed from that. And that's what drew me to go to school for that and eventually come here. There's something that's really rewarding about being involved in the creative process of making a record, and especially being present while it's being recorded, like seeing that performance, especially when you've got everything set up and dialed in and you can kind of sit back and hit record and just watch this amazing performance. That's like probably the most rewarding moments I've had in the studio.
What advice would you give your younger self?
That's a good one. Probably the advice that I would give to myself is to spend more time promoting myself as a professional in the industry, and that means these days social media, which I hate doing, but it's good advice. So
unnecessary evil.
Unnecessary evil, exactly. Yeah.
All right, so here we are at Wally's Hideout, also known as Studio C, and it was built early in the game when Wally and Bill first took over the building. So here's the control room. It's a classic front-loaded control room. It sounds great in here. And we have it set up as a hybrid studio where we've got a digital controller and a bunch of outboard preamps, Burl Mothership as the interface. We're making records here, just like always. We have a really fantastic live room. Let's go take a look at that. So we've taken it over now. 4 of us independent producers have sort of run it like a co-op, and we lease the room from Michael Ward and have our own business, which we call Wally's Hydeout, which is kind of like a play on Wally's legacy here. Here's the famous live room designed by Bill Putnam. Actually, the plans were copied from Western recording. I guess Wally Hyder went and booked studio time so he could measure the room and get the specs from Bill and really build it out. But
Inside guy.
yeah, the acoustics here are incredible. This is the room where Santana recorded Abraxas, and American Beauty was recorded here. Volunteers, Jefferson Airplane, and then other records along the way were the Hieroglyphics, and the Grateful Dead did a lot of recording in here and rehearsing in here for a long period of time. And I guess Surfing with the Alien, Joe Satriani did a lot of work in this room. It's a fantastic room for getting a live sound with the whole band playing all at once, which is not always an easy thing to find. Right here is a chase that goes all the way to the basement level, and it's open. It's like a mattress kind of thing, so the sound waves can escape. The long sound waves can escape the room, and you can basically keep the room from getting overwhelmed and closed out, even if you're playing. Like 3 Dead Kennedys records were done in here, for instance, and I'm sure they played loud as hell.
Oh, I bet.
But but because of that, you kind of get it. You still can have a good sound in the room, even though it's not huge. But if you want to keep those reflections in the room, you can pivot it on these hinges and then cover up the chase, and you're reflecting the sound back in. And then we got one more little feature here, which is our booth. We've got, I've kind of set this place up as a drum heaven. So I've got 5 different drum sets here, which I store back here. And we also use this as a vocal booth and for some isolation, for some overdubs and things like that. But yeah, so it's actually kind of a big room, and it's not totally dead like you would expect maybe for a vocal booth. So you can put a upright bass works great in here. Like I said, I'm kind of a specialist when it comes to drum sounds, and this is one of the best drum tracking rooms ever built. This is my Yamaha Maple Custom from the 80s, and it sounds wonderful. I've got a couple of Gretsch kits, and I take care of some of the best drummers on the planet. I feel pretty blessed to be part of such a wonderful space to make music. So.
We're surrounded by amazing gear. So I'm curious about your thoughts on the level of importance that people put on, oh, I need so-and-so this, I need so-and-so that. Do you think that's there's wisdom there, or do you think it's kind of sort of a hindrance?
I think the overall gear obsession is typically taken a little too far. And I, feel that when I talk to a lot of the, the interns here and just artists coming in that are interested in recording themselves, of that feeling that, oh, I've got to have an LA 2A to record great vocals, or, I've got to have a $10,000 microphone or something. It's great that we have those things here. The obsession has grown so much that the expense of these things are just insane. So it's you can get really good results with far less. It's just about it's more about the environment and the skills of the engineer. One of the things that I think is a real benefit to being in a pro studio like this is the working environment and the flexibility that we have here to move from recording one thing to the next. Some of the flexibility of setups we have and collaborative situations that we can set up here, the vocal booths, the different routing combinations we can use, and it's that and the collaboration with the engineer that I think makes a bigger impact on people's records than using a vintage C12 versus a modern $600 microphone or something like that.
Gotcha.
All that said, I love vintage mics, so
there's a reason they're sought after, but it might not be the end all be all. It's more how you're using it, the space, and more of a great song is going to be a great song.
It's that kind of old saying, like, a great guitar part starts with the guitar player. And then, a little less important is the guitar, and the amp. Even a little less important is the recording chain, but it all starts with the guitar player. Like you said, it does vary a lot, the recording process here, because we do everything from, hip hop sessions where people are bringing in tracks, and sometimes they're mixing those tracks, sometimes they're just recording their vocals on them. We do every part of the process. We'll record full bands here, of course. That's been sort of our, one of our mainstays for many, many years. So there's not a typical day here, but it's a little different now than it used to be. These days you can set up a recording session and you can work a day here and a day there, whereas in the the 80s, 90s, you would probably want to work 7 days in a row, 2 weeks in a row, that sort of thing. So it's a little more sporadic and spread out than it used to be, but it makes it more fresh and more palatable for people, in their schedules, to be able to come in and kind of hit the studio for a couple days at a time, and then, give it a couple months and think about what they want to do next. So like I said, a lot of our Originals the Building studios are now leased out to other people running their own business. And this is one of those. This is Joe Bagale, aka Otis McDonald.
Yeah, it was a pizza place. Hey, what's up, Jack?
How you doing?
I'm good, man. Hey, how you doing?
Hey there, I'm Chris.
Chris, what's up? I'm Joe.
Nice to meet you, Joe.
Here's my banana.
Yeah.
It's snack time. Welcome to Studio D at Hyde Street Studios. Well, it was kind of a fun full circle moment getting in this space. I don't know if Jack mentioned it to you, but I moved here 21 years ago from Rochester, New York, because I was so heavily influenced by Herbie Hancock's funk records from the 70s. So Headhunters, Thrust, Manchild, Secrets, all that stuff. And when I found out that this room that he made all those albums in was available to rent, I jumped on it right away and moved all of my equipment in here. So this space was empty, but the previous tenants that were in here had just rewired the live room to the control room. So it was fresh wiring, and all I had to do was bring all my equipment in and plug it in and get going. But I make music under the alias Otis McDonald, and have a pretty successful YouTube channel, and that's where that all kind of started. And as soon as I got in here, I started setting up cameras and live streaming weekly to show people on YouTube how I create music, how the sausage is made. So this is a little different than the rest of the studios in the building, because I'm not really bringing in bands here. It's just set up how I make records. I play most of these instruments here. So generally I'm in here by myself, which gets a little lonely, which is why I have to have friends come here to come play. And so I don't go insane in these like movie theater like settings. I have a mixture of like really old school vintage equipment, microphones, preamps, synthesizers, tape machines, and some custom new stuff. But I kind of combine the old with the new in terms of my workflow, and I use Ableton Live and Pro Tools to create the tracks and in a quick way, so I don't have to procrastinate too much. It's all about removing procrastination and just moving as fast as I can through a song so I can get on to the next one and not be too precious about this shit. So yeah, I've got this custom console here and these custom EQs, and then back here we've got some old Neve 1073s. Those were from Fantasy Studios, which is no longer with us, RIP. And these are some old Siemens V72s from the 1940s. Which is like what the Beatles would use. And then my buddy Steve was just eyeballing this funny reverb tank, this spring reverb made by Sansui. These were like with hi-fi stereos. You could add reverb to, what did you say? Dazed and Confused. Or anything you wanted to. And these are new synthesizers that are all analog that were sent out to me. And then this is an old drum machine. Got popularized by Prince. This is the Limb drum. Those are really cool. And this right here is the machine I started on when I was 12 years old. I've been making recordings on this ever since, I was like 11 or 12. And I have old reels of tape from when I was 12. I'm not going to play that for you because this shit sounds terrible. But it was all the beginning. And let me show you this live room. This is where Herbie did all those records I mentioned earlier. Also, Crosby, Stills, Nash Young did Deja Vu, or parts of it in here. The Grateful Dead did American Beauty in here. It's also the home of a lot of great hip-hop records. Tupac did his first album in here, Tupacalypse Now. The Humpty Dance by Digital Underground, that was done in this room. Green Day did Insomniac in here. The Pointer Sisters did their first 4 albums in here. Gosh, yeah, I think even like the Sesame Street, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it might have been recorded in here, because I know that was recorded in San Francisco by the Pointer Sisters, and they happened to be always working in this room at that time. So who knows? Maybe we can find that out.
There we go.
Well, yeah, man, got my drums, my Fender Rhodes, my Whirly, my Hammond organ, some old bass amp, and lots of basses and guitars. And yeah. This is what we got.
So yeah, recent recordings here. There's an album by the Lemon Twigs called Everything Harmony. That one, it was a very cool process, and that was kind of more old school, booked, I think a couple weeks here straight in the studio, and did some fun things, like brought in a full harpsichord.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really got creative with it. I really liked those guys, a young band and young producer that were really like wise beyond their years. So that one's to check out, a good one to check out, Everything Harmony. It's kind of got a lot of old school sounds to it. Let's see, other than that, One Republic, they did a single here called Rescue Me. That was our latest platinum record. They did parts of that here. So, well, I think in our long-term plans would be to secure the building, to secure like the long-term longevity of the studio here. So that's been something we've been kind of probing and exploring, is how to purchase and secure our place here. So the studio's been renting the building since 1980. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good tenants, I guess.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So the echo chamber here is a space that we don't put artists in, but we can rather patch any sound we want from Studio A into this room. It comes out the speaker, and then it gets recorded on the mics on the other side of the room, and it adds reverb.
Oh, wow.
So like a lot of the building, this was built in 1969 as well, and built specifically to produce reverb. So you can hear it on my voice right now, and all of the angles in the room are non-parallel, so there's no 90-degree angles in here. The ceiling is pitched, and it's all made out of sort of, reflective kind of plaster material. So we've got a Genelec monitor here on this side of the room, and then we've got 2 different pairs of microphones on the other side that we can choose from to get the return from the chamber. And we've got those going through mic preamps, and the speaker's always on, so it's really just line in, line out on our patch bay down in Studio A, and it's the same, echo chamber sound that was used on a lot of classic records. I had the privilege of meeting David Crosby a few years ago, and the first thing he said when he walked in the doors, he said, "Do you still have that echo chamber?" And I just thought it was awesome that he remembered that, and that was, what stuck out to him. So.
What is your thought process when selecting a microphone for an application? What are some things that you listen for, you look for, and then how does that inform your decision?
Mm-hmm. Selecting a microphone it's a lot of trial and error. You know, I feel like I have go-tos that work well for certain things. Of course, the reasons behind those are usually the EQ response and the polar response of the microphone, and then the type of the microphone. You know, whether it's a condenser or dynamic or something. But you know, all those factors come into play. If I'm, you know, recording a vocalist and they're playing piano at the same time, then I'll probably go with a dynamic mic. You know, close up on the vocals, something like an SM7 that I think sounds really good for what it is, and also rejects really well the off-axis material of the piano in that case. But you know, maybe for the same singer, if they're not playing another instrument, you know, maybe I would have a AKG C12. That's a nice mic. That's a little flatter than some of the Neumanns. The Neumanns have like that typical bump in the mid range, and the C12 can be a little flatter, a little more extended high end. So you know, all that stuff is just, you know, it's just all comes into play. You know, there's tube mics versus non-tube mics. That all comes into play too. If it's you know, hyper modern recording, might go with something solid state, you know, not tube, and transformerless to get like a really clean recording. So I'm, you know, kind of a big microphone nerd myself, and taking care of all of these is a big job for our techs here. But there are really some nice pieces here. Some of the highlights. We've got a U47, and this is kind of a rare U47. It's a U47P. Which comes with this switchable broadcast head, so you can remove this and put on the broadcast head, and then even different capsules here. So it's made for both, you know, public address and recording kind of. The C12s, we had one that we owned and needed another to match it, so we bought one. This was probably 7, 8 years ago. And I priced out how much it would be to insure it and ship it to the US. And it was about $50 cheaper for me to fly to Germany.
What? No way.
So I flew to Germany. I stayed with a friend for a few days and got kind of a free vacation out of it, and picked up this microphone while I was there.
Man, I was just I can save you money. Just put me on a plane.
Exactly. Yeah. When I priced that out, I was like, no way is it cheaper for me to take a little vacation. But
wow.
Yeah, that was one of the cooler things I did as part of my studio management job.
The things you have to go through, right?
Yeah. I guess my biggest tip for miking a guitar amp would be to just experiment. And by that, I mean, you know, use multiple mics if you can. Move them around. You know, sometimes the back of the amp provides a cool tone that you can mix with the mic on the front of the amp. Play with phase, of course. If you are using 2 mics and you want them to be perfectly in phase and just want just a straight comparison of the two, you know, line them up rather than try to, you know, phase align them in the box, you know, that sort of thing. Try to line up the capsules. You know, I find when I record guitar amps that a dynamic and a condenser usually provides me with some pretty good options, something like an SM57 and like a Sony C38. It's one of my favorite condensers for guitar amps. Yeah, that Sony C38 I mentioned that I like on guitars. We've got that here. It's sort of the slightly more modern brother to the Sony C37, which is the tube version. And so that one's a little bit more famous. C38 is similar, but no tubes. The mic techniques we use here in the studio are interesting because they have such a lineage. You know, I talked to an engineer who was here in the 1980s, who recorded a lot of the Dead Kennedys stuff, and he described his miking technique back then, and it was remarkably similar to what we do now. And it's just something that I had never thought about until then, because it was like passed down from generation to generation of engineer here. But you know, it's typically pretty conventional. You know, our drum miking is usually a spaced pair of C12s as overheads, you know, and your kind of typical close mics. But, you know, some of the things that I like to do that I don't see done a lot is, you know, coincident pairs. So a lot of XY and ORTF on instruments like guitar and piano, something where you can pan them wide and get a bigger image out of that instrument, especially if it's sort of the bedrock of the song. If the guitar, the piano, whether it's acoustic guitar, piano, something like that, if that's the main kind of main feature, like chordal kind of structure of it, then you want it to be big and present there. So you can find Hyde Street Studios online at hydestreet.com. You can, just Google us here. We're in San Francisco, downtown near Civic Center.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.